Bom dia, Lelê. Bom dia, Lalá. Lelê era o nome que os meninos recebiam quando desembarcavam dos navios escravos e se transformavam somente em Lelê. As meninas eram as Lalás. Perde seu nome, perde sua identidade, somente Lelê e Lalá. Então, falando em nome, nós gostaríamos de propor um desafio, tudo bem? Pode ser? Então, tá bem. O desafio é o seguinte, nós vamos aprender, então, só 3 notas, certo? Avisaram para vocês que vocês iam passar por isso no curso de Montessori? Tá bem? Sim. Vamos sair daqui todos... É assim. Lá, lá, lá. Podemos tentar? Lá, lá, lá. É fácil, né? Então tá bem. Então vamos lá. Lá, lá, lá. Lá, lá, lá. Lá, 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 e lá, lá, e lá, lá. Lá, 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 e lá, lá, e lá, lá. Lá, lá, lá. Lá, lá, lá. Lá, 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 lá. Lá, 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 lá. Bom, agora já está tudo certo, aprenderam, está tudo bem. Essas 3 notas mesmo. Então, o desafio é o seguinte. Como os lelês e lalás perderam seu nome, e aqui nós temos cada um o seu nome, e cada nome emite um som para o planeta, e emite o som para o universo. Cada nome é tão sagrado, que ele tem toda uma intenção. O desafio é descobrir qual é o nosso som, o que nós emanamos exatamente aqui, hoje. O desafio é cada um tentar brincar com seu nome nessa melodia. Vamos tentar? Eu, sei lá, posso fazer assim. Gisele. Vamos todo mundo junto? Cada um brinca com seu nome, experimenta de diversas formas possíveis e a gente vai falando o seu nome. Ninguém vai ficar ouvindo o colega do lado, não tem problema, tá bem? Ninguém vai dizer, certo? Sem problemas, tá bem? Vamos lá? Então, vamos lá. Gisele, Gisele, Gisele. Gisele. Mas olha só, tá bonito, tá ficando forte. Mas eu acho que, como a gente está sentado, o corpo da gente acaba não respirando e o ar não entra profundamente. E nós estamos falando em emanar o som do nosso nome para o universo, gente. Uau! Vamos tentar ficar de pé, então? Pode ser? Respira fundo. Respira fundo. E vamos lá. Segura na mão do outro que está do seu lado e junte seu nome com o dele. Canta junto aí. Gisele. São nomes e histórias. Agradece a mão que ele segurou nesse momento. Cada nome tem um som. Cada letra hoje eu sou adulto. A minha infância, simples infância. Senta-se num trono. Nela tem mais poder que todos os elementos juntos. Houve um tempo em que a terra enchia seu colo com prazeres seus. A terra possui ânsias que ela mesma provém. A terra ama de leite, empenha-se para que seu filho adotivo, a humanidade, liberte-se dos seus apogeus e seja apenas, grandiosamente, aquilo que nasceu para ser. A terra apenas é. Quando sinto o vento fluindo, eu ouço e vejo, eu ouço e sinto o bebê que voa e sobe para o colo de sua mãe. Eu vejo. E você? E você, professor ou filósofo, que recebe a herança, que tem a visão entre a cegueira, não fique cego, não fique nem cego e nem surdo. Veja a infinita e profunda plenitude do ser. Criança é fogo, é luz que transforma. Criança é ponto de luz nos nossos olhos. Criança é ponte de luz que clareia a humanidade. Criança é água cristalina. Criança é promessa e esperança. Nela está contidos os segredos da alma, em plena elaboração do homem. Na criança se nutre a humanidade. É aqui, em cada criança, exatamente aqui, eu vejo, ela está aí. Nesta criança, hoje, aqui, nós beberemos. E assim, construiremos quem somos para honrar a criança. Vamos beber?
Muito bom dia a todos. Depois dessa enxurrada de emoção, né, que a gente teve, essa abertura com essas dinâmicas tão lindas, eu quero dizer que é uma alegria imensa estar aqui nesse auditório tão cheio de pessoas querendo estudar, querendo aprender, aprofundar os conhecimentos em Montessori. Eu quero convidar, então, para fazer a abertura oficial, né, dessa que é a primeira conferência Montessori, primeira conferência internacional Montessori. Eu quero convidar uma pessoa que trabalhou incansavelmente para que tudo funcionasse da melhor maneira possível, que essa conferência seja o sucesso que ela será. Né, ela acaba de ser reeleita como presidente da Organização Montessori do Brasil, então eu quero chamar para fazer essa abertura oficial a professora Sônia Maria Braga. Sônia.
Será que eu vou conseguir falar? É muita emoção, ainda mais ver professores de Mato Grosso do Sul e do Rio de Janeiro reunidos numa mensagem tão linda. E o Rio Grande do Sul se representando aqui também. Essa união é indispensável. É tudo o que nós precisamos, ser unidos, né? Eliminar barreiras. Bom, eu escrevi alguma coisa, não sei se eu vou ler. Mas, primeiro, agradecer a todos vocês que aqui vieram prestigiar a nossa primeira Conferência Internacional pela OMB. Que nós possamos ter, nesses dias, rememorada a lembrança da mensagem maior que Montessori nos deixou, que é uma mensagem de nos educarmos para educarmos as crianças a favor da paz, para que a paz se faça. E esse momento atual está em sintonia com o que vem acontecendo. Nós que estamos ligados à EMS, à AME, os movimentos vêm acontecendo sempre com essa temática, a educação pela paz, porque ela se faz indispensável nos dias de hoje. Nós precisamos fortalecer isso em nós, porque se nós aprendemos que, enquanto adultos, só podemos educar a criança enquanto nós nos educarmos, nós precisamos fazer com que a paz exista em nós, para que possamos realmente transmiti-la para as crianças. É preciso que nós comecemos a banir de nós definitivamente o espírito competitivo, o egoísmo, a vaidade. Que realmente nós aprendemos a compartilhar, que nós aprendamos a entender o outro, a aceitar a diversidade. Essa é a grande mensagem, já que nós somos responsáveis por ajudar no desenvolvimento de uma geração melhor. Nós estamos sentindo a necessidade de que haja uma nova humanidade, resgatando, como Montessori disse, a humanidade no coração de cada um. Então, que ao longo desses próximos dias, nós possamos realmente permitir que germine esse amor humano em nós, que germine o sentimento de paz, com raízes profundas, porque apenas assim nós poderemos deixar um legado melhor para as nossas crianças. E nós sabemos que foi esta e é esta a ideia que Montessori nos deixou. E como Montessori conviveu algum tempo com Gandhi na sua estada na Índia, eu me lembrei de um pensamento de Gandhi. Não há caminho para a paz é o caminho. Que nós saibamos trilhar, então, esse caminho da paz. E assim, dou aberta a primeira Conferência Internacional Montessori pela OMB.
Bom, a gente vai começar, então, esses trabalhos. Eu quero convidar ao palco o pediatra, neurocientista, neuropediatra, o Dr. Steve Hughes. Ele é um grande especialista, viaja o mundo inteiro dando palestras, hoje está aqui para falar para a gente sobre educação para a vida. Vai aparecer ali. Educação para a vida, as perspectivas da neurociência na educação Montessori, da infância ao ensino fundamental. Dr. Hughes, please.
Bom dia. I have to say that you sure know how to start a conference here in Brazil. And I hope that I can make a presentation that is to the standard of that which came before me this morning. So today I have a slideshow for you, and I wonder if it might be possible to turn the lights a little bit darker, just a little bit, maybe 50%. And while that's happening, I want to say thank you to Sonia Braga. I'm here because of her. Luciana Barros, who helped translate the slides, and Julia Braga, who also helped create these slides for us today. So thank you, Sonia. Thank you, Lou. And thank you, Julia. What I want to speak about today is I want to speak about what you need to succeed. Maybe what children need to succeed. And what we need to succeed is this. We need a brain. We need a brain that functions well. We need a brain that can deal with novelty, that can create novelty or respond to novelty, new situations, new requirements. We also need a brain that can create and respond to routine. There are many things we do that we do the same way, every day, all the time. When you sat in your chair this morning, you weren't thinking about how to move the muscles of your body so that your body would sit in a chair. Sitting in a chair is pretty routine. But you know that it wasn't once. There was a time when it was a real challenge to figure out how to make your body sit in a chair. Thank you. There was a time when it was a novelty sitting in a chair, but with practice and with repetition, you learned how to make sitting down become routine. There was a time when taking the metro or taking your public transit to work was new. That was a novelty. And then with practice, you didn't have to think about how to get off at the right stop because it became routine. These are things that our brain does. It handles novelty and it creates routine. Now, in order to do these things, the brain needs to grow and mature. And we see in this animation, we see the sequence of maturation of the brain. The part that's turning blue, that part is becoming functional. Now, much of what we see here, this is sort of, I guess you could say, obligatory. But how well this process is undertaken from childhood to adulthood depends a lot upon the kinds of experiences that that brain has. Now, you're very sophisticated people. You understand a lot about child development. And you know that we can create conditions that are very conducive to the brain developing, giving it opportunities to engage in the kinds of activities that promote its development. And you also know it's possible to create conditions that constrain this process. When brains have opportunities to engage in the kinds of activities that they want to do anyway, the brain wants to build itself, the child wants to grow in independence. When we create conditions that allow that, the brain thrives, and children from all backgrounds, under the right conditions, can develop the best brain that they could. It doesn't always happen, because we don't always have the circumstances that promote that. Now, there's something else about the brain that you may not know. I want you to go back now for a moment and think about this morning when you woke up and when you prepared to come to the conference today. I think most of us believe in hygiene, yes? You took a shower? Raise your hand if you didn't take a shower. Just curious. Maybe don't raise it too high. Okay, so I know what happened. You got out of the shower. You cleaned your hair. You got out of the shower. You paused for a moment and you looked in the mirror. And you recognized that body, that is you, right? Did you say, still got it, baby? Does everybody else do that? Yeah, so you know what you look like. You're familiar with your body, with you, but it turns out that your brain has a very different understanding of your body. If we see how your body is represented in the brain, it's a very different picture. The way your body is represented in your brain doesn't look like that beautiful figure in the mirror. Your body, from the perspective of your brain, looks like this. Yeah, that's your body from the standpoint, the perspective of your brain. So according to your brain, your body is, well, it really is all about learning about the world by touching it, by learning to understand how things are, by manipulating. Your brain understands the purpose of your body to explore, learn, and manipulate the world with its hands. And also with the mouth. And this is why a young child, touches everything, and everything goes in the mouth too. These are the senses that are most significant for the brain. This touch, the sensation, and the manipulation of the world. We have a brain because we can engage in the world. We have a brain because we can do things in the world. And we know if we could somehow create a process of education that would exploit this nature of the brain, that the brain is designed to use the hands to learn about and to engage in and to affect the world, if only there was a way to, for all young children, create conditions that would allow them to utilize the muscle that is the brain, to engage, to affect, to change, to explore the world through the senses and through movement. If only there was a way. Does anybody have any ideas about how we could do this? And we know that if we want this process to happen, and we want to promote the brain's natural development, if we want to create conditions that allow that brain to do the kinds of things that help promote its growth, we have to let that funny-looking figure, that strange human being, which is really a more realistic view of you than the view you have getting out of the shower, if we want to allow that brain to build itself, we need to let that creature, which is designed to explore and to move and to manipulate the world with hands, with movement, we need to allow it to do certain kinds of activities. We can describe the kind of activity that strange creature needs to engage in. We can describe it like this. To promote this process, we need to create conditions that allow that developing brain to engage in motivated, effortful, repeated, trial and error experimental interactions with the environment. The muscle that is the brain won't grow unless we let it exercise itself. The habits, the capabilities, the automatic movements of sitting, of standing, of walking, of running, of making a Montessori presentation, of driving a car. All of these capabilities develop through practice. Practice opportunities. Practice opportunities like this one. So is he motivated? But he doesn't know how to do it. So it's effortful, right? It's hard. It's challenging. And he's going to repeat this activity, isn't he? He doesn't know how to do it, so he'll make mistakes. He'll identify the error, he'll correct the error. He has no idea what he's seeing here or how to do it. Maybe for his young brain, he doesn't really see clearly the difference in size of these blocks, but he knows they're different. It's hard to understand what the world looks like from his perspective. But it seems to be nature's design that he wants to figure it out, doesn't he? He wants to. He wants to understand this. And of course, he wants to do it himself. He wants to develop the mastery. No, he wants to do it himself. No. Okay, and such satisfaction. This is what the brain wants to do. He sees that there's a logic to this. He's watched other children do it. He can taste it, but it's new for him. It's novelty. And again, he has a developing brain. There's not a lot of that brain that is built yet, but it's nature's design that he wants to do the activities that help him exercise the muscle, to develop, well, the sensory motor capabilities that he needs to be successful in life. And of course, lucky you, it's just another day at the office for a Montessori teacher, just another day at the office. And all the activities, all the materials that make up the vast and rich Montessori classroom, all the practical life activities that allow them to practice developing control and management of their bodies, all the language materials that help them practice and develop the skills necessary to use language and mathematics, and the sensorial activities like we see here that are necessary to help the brain perceive and understand what it's seeing in the world. It's just another day at the office for a Montessori teacher to facilitate this process. This process which is, well, much of which is optional, but so much is so important. What if every child could go to a place every day where they got to engage in the kinds of activities that by nature's design they're driven to engage in, that would allow them to experience the conditions that would permit maximal opportunity to exercise this muscle, to develop these capabilities so that they have the best brain possible regardless of what potential they began with. Now, you're sophisticated people, you understand this, and many, but not all, of the parents of the children in your communities are also thinking about human development. Many of them do the things that would be helpful at home to help their children learn to understand, engage, manipulate, explore, affect the world. You do this with your children. Many of your families understand this, but not every family understands this. We know that if you do give these opportunities during the early years, that the sensorial pathways of the brain will form themselves given the opportunity to be exercised. We know that the motor system and language and even higher cognitive functions are developed as a consequence of engaging in experiences in the environment. Now, Montessori understood this better than anyone prior to her in history, and during the first plane, there's a tremendous amount of structure being built, connections being formed, connections that form as a consequence of opportunities for the brain to do what the brain wants to do, to engage in the process of experimentation, of engagement, of exercise. Montessori knew this. In fact, we can look at Montessori's bulb diagram and wow, the 0 to 6 years, the years of most intense development. She understood that. It absolutely conforms to what is known through modern neuroscience now. She understood, as we all understand now, that this is what you need to survive. And if you want to have that reach its highest potential, you have to have this guy, you have to give opportunities for this guy to engage in these kinds of activities, to engage in motivated, effortful, repeated, trial and error, experimental interactions with the environment. We build the brain by using it. The brain doesn't build unless it gets an opportunity to really be exercised, to be engaged. So that's education for life. Now, we can speak more generally about the development of life. Here we see the evolution of vertebrates on Earth. We won't go into detail on what we see here, but this is the process of evolution. That anything that could perceive the environment and is capable of movement develops the ability to perceive and to evaluate information that it receives from the environment, figures out how to take appropriate action and then takes that action. In order to survive, if you can move and you can perceive, then you will develop. There will be a mechanism that evolves that helps you determine what sort of action to take, to perceive the environment, to evaluate information, to select an appropriate behavior, and to take action. Evolution selects for improvement in these areas. This is the process that we evolved to become the species that we are. These are the processes necessary to adapt, to respond to the environment, the processes necessary for survival. Because anything that needs to eat and can be eaten and is capable of movement needs to move to eat, move to escape, or stop moving. And if it evolves a mechanism that allows it to make decisions about the kind of movement it's going to engage in, it will survive. Evolution will select for improvement in these capabilities. Really, the fundamental basis of survival and evolution is an organism's ability to look around, figure out what needs to be done, and to do it. And if you are good at looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and doing it, you will evolve as a Montessori teacher, or as a parent, or as the citizen of a country, as a partner. Those who are better at looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and doing it will go further, will have better chances of surviving and thriving in the world. And this is fundamental. This is fundamental. I mean, this capability exists in even the single-celled organism. We can look at this illustration here. Here's an amoeba which has looked around and figured out that there's a food source and is moving toward it. And there's two parameciums who haven't. That's it. Somebody's lunch, somebody survives. It's kind of brutal, isn't it? And this is fundamental to any life that can sense and move. So here's a bacteria. Bacterium has the capacity to sense the environment. There's a mechanism, a reflexive mechanism, that causes a change in the flagellum so that the bacteria moves toward favorable conditions and away from unfavorable conditions. The most primitive form of life on Earth, the bacteria, has a mechanism to decide where to move because it senses something in the environment and it directs its apparatus of movement toward or away. Fundamental to life. Now we can go much higher up. We can look at a honeybee. Honeybee has the capacity to sense the environment based upon what it senses, to select certain special movements, and then to engage in those movements, to look around, figure out what needs to be done, and to do it. It's fundamental to life, to survival, to evolution. Even the highest form of life on Earth, humans, even we have a much more sophisticated set of mechanisms. We have sensory organs. We even have sensory processing so that we don't have to think about all the senses that we're drawing in. We have a processor that limits the senses that reach consciousness. You are not right now, until I say it, thinking about how your feet feel in your shoes, but now you are. It's not necessary for you to feel the inside of your shoes, to use other senses to hear what's being said, to look at the screen, because it's not necessary for the activity you're doing. So there's a processor that kind of blocks those your feeling of your seat in the chair. That's not necessary right now. And humans have very sophisticated movement capabilities. We can demonstrate unique movements. Okay, we can move in ways that we've never moved before. I would say that I've never moved in many of the ways that we saw earlier today. If the first time that I did some of those moves, it would be unique. But if I did them enough, if I practiced them, they would become automatic. So I can act in new ways. I can act in new ways that I've practiced to the point of becoming then automatic ways. And of course, we all have reflexes. So reflexes are movements that you get for free, right? Automatic. You don't have to develop those. And these are all the sophisticated kinds of movement that human beings can do. To look around and figure out what needs to be done, to apprehend what's happening in the environment, and make an appropriate behavioral response given what's seen. Now, the model that I'm describing is a fairly new model. It's really only been in the last 15, maybe 20 years that neuroscience has kind of arrived at the understanding that the reason you have a brain is because you're capable of perceiving the environment and you're capable of movement. And that intelligence process evolves as a consequence of evolution, because the better you can perceive the environment, the better you can move, and most importantly, the better you can make a determination regarding what is the appropriate movement to make right now, the better you will survive, the better that your gene line or gene pool will have a chance in evolution. It's fundamental. For both primitive organisms and mammals, there's a mechanism, which we call intelligence, a mechanism that mediates the choice between continuing the current movement, switching to some other movement, or stopping movement altogether. A process that is based on looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and doing it. The fundamental mechanism of survival and of evolution. Because anything that can move, anything that needs to eat, anything that can be eaten, needs to move to eat, or move to escape, or stop moving. This is fundamental to evolution. This is fundamental to our kind of life. And of course, it's nature's design that we are driven to develop these capabilities. The child wants to walk. The child is driven to engage in the activities that develop the capacity to walk. And we can do amazing things with movement. We can develop vast capabilities to move our bodies. And when you watch the Olympics, they do things that it's unimaginable how they're able to do them. But even the greatest figure skater began by trying to maintain her balance on the ice. And through repetition, through motivated, effortful, repeated trial and error, experimental interactions with ice skates on ice, this woman's brain developed the capacity to make the automatic movement adjustments to remain vertical on ice. And that's just where it began. And then every other movement, every trick that she does on the ice began as a series of mastering basic movements and joining those basic movements together into more advanced movements, and joining those more advanced movements together into even more advanced movements, and stringing those advanced movements together, to spin on the ice. And then taking that trick and joining it with other tricks to make the Olympic routine that wins the gold medal or the silver medal. And maybe it's easy to understand this process when we think about it in terms of Olympic figure skating or some other kind of movement activity. But it's exactly the same processes that lead to someone being a brilliant emergency room physician. Because it is just another version of looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and doing it that is at the foundation of becoming a brilliant physician. Some physicians are better at looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and doing it. and they are therefore better physicians. More of their patients survive. Because this process of being able to look around, figure out what needs to be done, and do it is fundamental to adaptability, to responding to the environment, to survival. It's the basic mechanism necessary for life. Now, there's something else that we do. We communicate. And we can see an interesting illustration about how the brain forms itself when we think about the parts of the brain necessary for communication. So here's a little diagram of small elements in the brain, little, you might say, little processors that work together through connected network that are, this is the necessary mechanisms for language. There's a motor system that develops the ability to form the words necessary for speech. There's a phonological processor that understands and differentiates and interprets the sounds of language. There's a meaning-making system that pairs unique words with the concepts those words represent. There are distinct processors involved, and there's a sophisticated network that connects these processors together. So we have processors and we have networks that connect the processors together. So here's where, of course, language resides in the brain. The mechanical mechanisms tend to reside in the left hemisphere, but we now know that language is actually vastly represented all throughout the brain. But the mechanical aspects seem to be mostly in the left hemisphere for most people. And we can watch how that system evolves. We can watch now at 2 months of age, we begin to see just the barest traces of some of these aspects of the language system developing. And we see through experiences in the environment, through practice, through listening, through trying to figure out what those people, what they mean with these words, these sounds. They're not words yet. Well, now they're becoming words. The mechanism to produce words is developing. Reciprocal language is developing. The system builds itself. The system wants to build. It wants to build itself. The child is driven to build a language system, and with the right kinds of opportunities and experiences during what you know to be the sensitive period for language development, it will construct itself. And now at 36 months, we already see all the elements of a language system. They're all in place. It's a functional language system, but it's not yet mature. Now, I don't have a picture of it, but in the years ahead, this language system becomes much tighter. It becomes much less fuzzy. All that fuzziness, that's all using resources. That's the whole left hemisphere is involved in language right now at 36 months of age. It's not a good language system. It's a pretty good language system. But with further practice and refinement, it actually becomes smaller. It becomes more efficient. There's fewer connections because the connections that matter most become strong. Less fuzzy, more compact, more efficient of energy and cognitive resources. So here we have the foundations built, and with further maturation will come refinement. We know some of the mechanisms. We know from research that it's adult-child conversations, it's the interactivity. It's not just exposing children to language, but also engaging them in reciprocal conversation, which gives the child practice at using language at using language as a tool to get their needs met, at responding to questions about the book that we just read. Practice putting those words together, practice understanding sentences that it hasn't heard before. And this is fundamental to the development of language. Two-sided conversations, using language as a tool. Now, you're sophisticated people, and you understand that. Certainly, as Montessori teachers, you really understand that. And many of the parents in your school communities also understand this. But not every parent understands this or understands it as well as you do. We know from other research that children who are raised in poverty, for example, by the time they are 36 months of age, have vocabularies that are less than half the size of children who are raised by parents who have higher education backgrounds, more professional type people, people whose whole job has depended upon them using their brain and, like being smart people and doing well in school. They engage in much more of this kind of reciprocal, problem-solving, problem-directed, getting needs met kind of speech with their children. Parents living in poverty have less time to do this. They maybe have 2 jobs, or they have a job that they work 14 hours a day, or they're more stressed, or they have housing insecurity. They have more burning survival issues to address and don't have the time or resources, and also sometimes not the understanding that their child's language development depends upon these reciprocal opportunities. Really, opportunities for the child to engage in effortful, because it's hard, effortful. Learning language is hard. It's why almost nobody learns a third, much less a second language in many places. It's hard to learn a language. You have to be pretty motivated. You have to engage in effortful work at mastering that language, which means lots of repetition, which means lots of trial and error, trying to figure out how to say that thing in Spanish or Portuguese or English or Mandarin, the language that you're learning. But you're sophisticated people. You understand that it's essential for the child to use those hands, to use those ears, to really, like this child, how does it work? What is she doing with that mouth? You understand that the child, there's no escaping it. The child needs to engage in that motivated, effortful, repeated, trial and error, experimental interactions with the environment. That's how you build the muscle that is the language system. Within the muscle, that is the brain. You're sophisticated people. You know a lot about this already. Let's talk some more about routine, okay? So one of the things we mean by routine is we mean to say that routine is efficient. You have to devote much less attention to communication than you did when you were 2 years old. Communication, you just do, you just talk. You don't have to think about how to form the words, what words should go together, what word comes first in the sentence. If you had to do that every time you tried to order lunch at a restaurant, you would spend a lot of time trying to get it right, and you would use a lot of energy. Your brain would be using a lot of energy to engage in that kind of problem-solving activity. It's efficient when it becomes routine, when it becomes automatic. And the brain is designed to build these efficiencies. It's designed to build what are called sensory-motor couplings. Do you understand what I mean by that concept? When I see this, I do that, and then the thing I want to have happen will happen. When the light turns green, I can press the accelerator and I go. I don't have to interpret a lot about what the different colors of the stoplight mean. They're pretty automatic. In fact, green means go is so automatic that sometimes you start pushing the accelerator when somebody else's light turns green, right? That happens, doesn't it? Because green means go is pretty automatic. We can look at a nice illustration of how the brain builds sensory motor couplings, how the brain builds automaticity. We can look at a nice example here in a minute. We can look at the example of Tetris. Have you played Tetris? Raise your hand if you've ever played Tetris. if you're sitting next to somebody who didn't raise their hand, you can tell them what Tetris is, but do it later. So we know from a research study done about Tetris, we know that, yeah, can you believe it, a research study done on playing Tetris. The government money at work, right? Okay, but it's a good study because that's what a brain looks like when it's playing Tetris for the first time. It's kind of like a weather radar map, that the more intense the color, the more intense the activity. And what we see is that almost the whole brain is activated. Activation means using energy. So this brain is using an enormous amount of energy to try to figure out how to play Tetris. It takes apparently about 45 days to become a pretty good Tetris player. This is the learning curve for Tetris. And after 45 days of practice, the activation in the brain, it changes from this. It changes from this to this. Because it turns out that Tetris is not that computationally difficult a task. It doesn't take that many neurons to play Tetris. The challenge is figuring out what neurons you need and connecting them together in a new way so that you build a little Tetris muscle. And that's what we have, a brain that has built a little Tetris muscle. I mean, you can kind of see one little bright point there, okay? That's sort of, you could argue maybe that's the Tetris muscle. The brain has developed automaticity at Tetris. It's built the sensory and motor coupling necessary to do Tetris. It's developed mastery of Tetris. So now Tetris is easy. And it's the same process when you learned how to ride a tricycle when you were a little child. This is the first time sitting on the tricycle, and this is practice, practice, practice. Because at some point, riding a tight tricycle became automatic, because the body developed the muscle necessary to move the body in that way. I remember at the university trying to play Tetris and looking at my friend who was really good at playing Tetris. My friend could play Tetris, eat a hamburger, and drink beer, and try to meet women all at the same time, because all those resources were now available to do other activities because Tetris was automatic. Now, this is your brain the first time you sat down to try to do a Montessori presentation. Anna made it look so easy. And then I had to make those same steps. And it was so hard. Because it is hard. Mastering the unique motor, it's novel. It's a novel experience the first time you do it. But with practice, with repetition, it becomes more automatic. Now, to have all of these presentations mastered, it takes a long time. And maybe you're still refining some of your technique. But when things become automatic, well, then you can just do the thing, right? So you're a better Montessori teacher in maybe your third year of work, because it takes a while. You learned it. The first year, you probably had your album like, oh, hold on, kid, just a second. Even in that first year, it was still about getting the movement right. But in the second year, you kind of had your game together. And in your third year, it's about the child. It's about you observing the child. It's not about the sequence, because you've got that. You mastered the sequence. You're no longer thinking about how to do it. You're just doing it. and you're engaging in the child, you're observing the child, not observing your own hands, trying to do the crazy Montessori presentation. And how did you develop the automaticity of doing that material presentation? How did you develop that? Oh boy, yeah, you did this stuff. It's the only way. Some people drop out of Montessori teacher training. Some people stop. They decide, this is worthy activity, but I just don't have the motivation necessary to spend the time, to spend the energy and time mastering it. I thought it was for me, but I guess it's not for me. But good for you that it's for you. I just don't have the motivation for this. Now, maybe I have the motivation for something else. I hope that every child, every adult finds what they have the motivation necessary for them to develop mastery. Now, it turns out that it's not just about building automaticity. It's not just about building those little special muscles, the tricycle riding muscle, the Montessori materials presentation muscle, the Tetris muscle, the language muscle. Okay, these are all muscles that develop within the larger muscle of the brain. But the brain engages in lots of real-time interaction with the environment. It's not just about doing the things that are automatic. It's about doing things that it hasn't done before. It's about surviving in the world by paying attention to what's going on and in real time, all the time, making a decision about what the appropriate behavior would be right now. Many situations, automatic works. And if automatic works, then automatic will develop because your brain wants to be efficient. The first day you go to a new job, nothing is automatic. How to drive, how to take the bus, how to take the tram, what metro stop. You probably on the first day, before the first day, maybe you even practiced taking the tram to the new stop. Maybe you did it. I've done that. The day before I begin a new job, I drive the route to make sure that I know how to find it. Because it's not automatic yet. It's novel. It's a new thing. So there's lots of situations that are novel that we engage in all the time. And there's lots of them that become automatic with practice. But to deal with the new situations in life that we experience, we actually have to build a set of very sophisticated neurological networks. These are the connections, kind of the wiring underneath the surface of the brain that connect different processes or different regions. And these networks connect different areas, and they allow us to engage in more general kinds of actions. They work together to allow us to survive. There seems to be about 7 complex neurological networks that are activated by life and that are necessary for survival. Now, this wiring, the potential and some of the underlying structure, it's present at birth, but it's not yet developed. Okay? So it's almost like the place where the railroad tracks are going to go, that place has already been cleared. The land is cleared for the place where the railroad track will go. In English, we call that the right-of-way. Maybe in Portuguese is an equivalent. The right-of-way. Yeah, okay, yeah. But the track's not laid yet. You understand what I mean? So the brain wants to lay the tracks. It wants to build these sophisticated, complex neurological networks. It wants to connect these areas together to do these functions. It wants to create, okay, lots of little words. I'm not going to read all this to you, but you can read them in the notes when you get the copy of the slides. So we have a ventral attention network. We have an entire network that just keeps track of what objects are and what they're used for. That's what that sophisticated network does. We have another attention network that controls focus, where attention is directed, where objects are, and that network contains information about how an object is used. So the how it's used is a different network from what it is. Isn't that interesting? So these networks have to work together for you to use tools or use resources in the environment. There's a network that is what is activated when we're turning new novel activity into more routine activity. Like the frontoparietal network is what's lit up when you're trying to master the new material presentation. It uses a tremendous amount of energy. It's why being a Montessori teacher in training was so tiring. It's why you felt your brain being stretched by learning how to do Montessori. Because your brain was being stretched. You were using these muscles a lot when you were becoming a Montessori teacher. So I won't go into too much more detail. These work together. These three networks, these lay the foundation for what's called the behavioral control network. And we'll talk more about that maybe tomorrow. Oh, sorry, the action control network, okay? So this is the network that is activated when we are looking around, figuring out what needs to be done and doing it. It's the decision maker, it's the behavior response selector. There is great survival advantage in having these sophisticated, complex networks become mature. The potential for them, maybe little teeny wisps, exist at birth, but they are not yet built. And the way that these networks get built is as a consequence of the child's engagement with the world. Like every other aspect of the brain, when we use the muscle, we build the muscle. We want to build the networks, we have to use the networks. And we know from some very interesting research that children who are, it's research that has been done with children who are in early adolescence. There's research showing that children who have more mature, more well-developed network, okay, the action control network, that they score higher on IQ tests than children who are the same age whose action control network is less well developed. You could say that that makes sense because the problem solver, the external problem solver, is the action control network, looking around, figuring out what needs to be done, and then doing it. So a more mature, a more sophisticated, a better developed action control network, well, you know, it would do better on an IQ test because an IQ test is doing an awful lot of looking at and figuring out and doing, okay? That's problem solving, that's what an IQ test measures. So the more mature your action control network, the better your survival because you'll be better at looking around, figuring out what needs to be done and doing it. Intelligence, problem solving, has a strong survival advantage. How do we build the action control network? Well, you know the answer. There's only one way. There's only one way. We give the brain opportunities to engage in motivated, effortful, repeated, trial and error, experimental interactions with the environment. And here is a big problem because it actually has to be motivated. The brain has to care about the outcome. It is not enough for the child to act as if they care about the outcome. Now, do you understand the difference between acting as if you care about the outcome and really caring about the outcome? If a child gets to choose the activity they're going to engage in, they have chosen an activity that they are motivated to engage in. When the child is forced, when the child has no choice, when 30 children in a classroom have no choice. Okay, today is a national holiday. We all gonna cut out and color and paste together the wonderful flag of our country, Brazil. We're all going to do that today to celebrate our national heritage. All 30 of us will now do that. That's what happens in some classrooms, right? Okay, somebody wants to do that. Maybe somebody is at a stage in their evolution where they like cutting, they like to create order. Maybe somebody likes to do that. Maybe a lot of the children find this engaging and intrinsically rewarding, and they're motivated to do it, and they really lean into the activity. They make a beautiful Brazilian flag, so we're all proud of the child who makes the beautiful flag of Brazil. But it's not what every child wants to do. Maybe there's a child who would really have liked to engage in some kind of activity that involved, well, music or sound or exploring different shapes that they see in the world, or maybe some child was really into figuring out math this day. But if all of us are going to now make a beautiful Brazilian flag, okay. And if you're going to get in trouble for not participating, yeah, okay. There will be a lot of pretending to engage in this activity. So from the standpoint of the maturation of the action control network and other aspects of the brain, it's not really being developed. The ability to look like you're engaged in the activity, okay, that's a kind of skill, but it's not really the kind of thing that builds the muscle that is the brain. You all understand that. That's why you're Montessori teachers. So what is this child mastering? So what is he doing now? Is he motivated? He's analyzing the sounds he's hearing. He's comparing the pitches. Think about what's lighting up in his brain. There's a part of the brain that is about processing of sound, maybe related to some part of the brain in some way that processes language. It's not easy for him. If it was easy, he wouldn't be that interested in it, because it's nature's design that we are driven to engage in those kinds of developmental activities that are at the edge. It's nature's design that because he can taste it, but he doesn't have it mastered yet, it intrigues him. There's a problem to solve here that he can solve. Is he motivated? Is he demonstrating effort? Is he repeating the activity? Is he doing trial and error experiments? Yeah, he's got it. He checks it. Is that it? Was that it? Just another day at the office for all of you Montessori teachers. And she's doing the same things when she's mastering the sound of the letters that comprise her language. All of them, all the children in your schools every day, this guy, all day is engaged in this kind of activity. Because that's what you need to do. That's what you need to succeed. They're building the brain. They're dealing with novelty by building this sophisticated set of cognitive networks. They're building routines. Their brains are developing automaticity of those functions that are automatable. These are the things you need to do. If you're going to survive, you need to look around, figure out what needs to be done, and do it. This is what you need to do if you're going to be a figure skater or a doctor, because everything that survives needs to adapt, respond to the environment. It's fundamental mechanism of survival. Montessori understood that. That's why she created Education for Life. And lucky are you Montessori teachers, that you get to support this process. Thank you very much. Questions, yeah? Yeah, we got time for questions, yeah. So we built in some time for questions. And you want to say something more about that?
Não, era isso. Eu não tinha anunciado antes, mas Dr. Hughes está disponível para responder algumas perguntas. Se vocês puderem anotar num papelzinho, né, e eu faço a tradução das perguntas para ele. Você tem? Ah, sim, pode acender as luzes, por favor. Obrigada. Aguardando, então, as perguntas.
Okay, great. If you read it, you speak a little English? Yeah. Okay, so you can read it for them.
I'll try to translate. A gente tem aqui a primeira pergunta, que é para crianças de inclusão, se seria esse mesmo processo. Então, eu vou traduzir a pergunta para o Dr. Hughes. There's someone, I don't know whose question is this. She wants to know if for special kids, if the process is the same process for special kids.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, it's the same process for special kids, but some of the mechanisms maybe aren't developing normally. We know, for example, with dyslexia, children with developmental reading problems, some of those mechanisms for language in generally the left hemisphere, for whatever reason, for example, the phonological processor doesn't seem to be developing normally. But the only way you develop a phonological processor is, there's only one process that you build brain. Now, about 80% of children will learn to read pretty much no matter how you teach them. I mean, reading comes pretty easy for 80% of children. 20% of children, they might need something a little special because maybe the phonological processor, little muscle, something's not quite right in how it's not ready to develop the same way. But you can develop a phonological processor by engaging in motivated, repeated, trial and error experimental interactions with phonology. You just have to do a lot more of them. It's more challenging. You have to do more practice, but you can build that processor. You can do effective intervention for dyslexia. You have to know the foundational reason. Sometimes they get the reason wrong, and then they focus on the wrong aspect of it. So if you do a good diagnostic evaluation for reading, then you maybe can identify the thing that needs more of this kind of work, because for whatever reason, it's not developing normally. But there's only one way that it develops, and that is through this kind of practice, focused practice, or through the practice at a compensatory mechanism. But that compensatory mechanism, that develops through focused practice.
Ok. Algumas linhas educacionais valorizam muito o brincar e desdenham o processo Montessori. O que o brincar representa no desenvolvimento do cérebro? Some educational lines, they give too much value to playing, but they don't give much value to Montessori method.
Mm-hmm.
They disdain.
Who is doing this?
I don't know, but sure quem está fazendo isso. Ele perguntou quem faz isso, quem valoriza o brincar, mas desvaloriza o método Montessori. She wants to know, she or he, what does playing represent to developing the brain?
Okay. Well, some play represents children engaging in practice opportunities, right? They're practicing these activities, like role playing, okay? They're practicing the things that a mama does or a daddy does. You know, we know, speaking of play, okay? Speaking of play, so we know Angeline Lillard. We know Angeline Lillard? Okay. So, you know, she very recently published a study. Children offered opportunities to play with toys or play with the real object that the toy represents, okay? And they uniformly, they want to use the real object. They don't want to use the plastic shovel. They want to use a real shovel that's the right size. So I think in many situations, play using toys, they would just as soon, you know, play with something real. And it doesn't look like play when it's not a toy, but it's the same kind of practicing. So role-playing is simulating the behavioral patterns of people who are also in their world, or different kinds of people. Still exercising the muscle, trying out different things. Someday when you're a mommy, you'll care for a child too. And I'm going to practice those activities. Better to practice with a real baby, but if there's no real baby around, okay, I'll practice with a dolly. I can do that. But they would prefer to practice with the real baby, unless the real baby's too loud or, you know, too difficult.
How was the process to connect Montessori with neuroscience?
Oh, well, the process of connection of Montessori with neuroscience, it really took off. It really took off when it was possible to really understand the mechanisms of the development of the brain. How do we develop the brain? Like all this stuff, this wasn't possible 30 years ago. The pictures that I'm showing you, 30 years ago, you couldn't really see this. Now we understand that this process of practice causes the development of the automaticities, et cetera. So it seemed, I guess, my perspective on this is once we could start watching what the brain was doing, we could see that there was an alignment between what Montessori said and what the process the brain goes through is. Now, having said that, I want to say that lots of people want to connect lots of education to the brain. It's very trendy to say like brain-based education. I think this perspective that, you know, we need to build the brain, we need to build the cognitive networks of the brain, I think this is pretty new. Usually people talk about, and what do most people think education is for? What's the purpose of education for most people? Well, in almost every other pedagogy, it's about learning stuff. Learning things, right? Content. And really, learning the things you need to know so that you do good on the big test. And so, you know, in Montessori, you get the content for free. The content comes along for the ride as you do the processes that build the maturation of the brain's systems. Other pedagogies, we're not the only people who have figured out that the brain builds by using it. So lots of people have this understanding, have this instinct. So we see evidence of this in Reggio Emilia. You know, we see evidence of this in project-based education, child-centered education. Okay, there's a taste. People understand this process. But nobody has got it as clearly as Montessori had it. And nobody had it as clearly as Montessori. So, you know, if you'll forgive me, you're missing the mark if you think that you're doing Montessori so they can learn things to do well on the test. That's not the point, okay? Now let's build a brain that can master the things that are going to be on the test and master everything else that is about life. If you're all good people, but I think some of you still think maybe that this is about another way to learn this stuff. Learning this stuff is a byproduct, okay? They learn this stuff while they're doing the things that build the brain. That's an important point. That's what sets Montessori, you know, in its best form. This really sets Montessori apart. because she really understood that we build those different muscles, we build the systems of the brain through this process that we keep describing. Lots of people, they smell that, they detect it, but nobody had it as clearly as Montessori. And that developmental instinct to create conditions to facilitate, that's not unique to Montessori. That's something that many humans have in them, that sense to create conditions to facilitate the self-development of the child. And other pedagogies that are trying to do activity, they sense that. But again, no one built as comprehensive and as clear and as profoundly developmental a facilitated system as Montessori did. So you do your work best when you're staying closest to Montessori's vision. This we can do better than anybody, okay? We can build brains better than anybody. So, and it's all there, you know? It's all in Montessori. So you'll do the best work that is possible to be done for a developing brain if you're really digging in and doing Montessori well. Now, you get to choose how you want to do it, right? You get to make choices. I believe in your freedom. But if you're doing Montessori 40% or Montessori 60%, then there's room for you to really do a better job with the children if we understand that our job is building brains. If we think our job is learning the stuff that they need so they can take the test, you know, that's fine, okay. But Montessori is really built for a different purpose. A purpose that, as a byproduct, as a secondary outcome, yeah, they can learn the things that they need to do for the test. Do you understand what I mean, this distinction that I'm drawing? Okay, thank you for that. Sorry to go on and on about it, but we can answer more questions.
Only one more.
Okay.
Ele vai responder a mais uma pergunta e a gente vai pedir a ele que depois disponibilize as respostas para as outras perguntas que foram entregues no site, assim como a conferência dele vai estar disponível no site também depois do evento, né? Só para todo mundo que formulou as perguntas, vocês não vão ficar sem resposta. A próxima pergunta, a última que ele vai responder hoje, é como motivar um aluno que hoje vive num mundo interativo, com tablet, computador e tal. How can you get kids motivated when they live in such a world with many devices, tablets and computers?
So how do we get children motivated when we live in a world of such distractions? Okay, well, we can control the distractions that are present in our immediate environment. We can control those distractions. We can reduce them. We can create conditions that are free. Like, here's the problem, okay? You got one of these? Have you got one of these? Okay. Humans are tool users, right? Humans are tool users. Humans like technology. It's in us that we like tools. This is the most advanced tool that has ever existed in human history. Everybody loves a gadget, okay? Everybody loves technology. Every child loves technology. So, you know, if you have this in your Montessori classroom, I know you don't, right? But if you did, good luck. Good luck. Because this is more compelling than anything in the Montessori classroom. Now, it's not the fault of the Montessori materials, okay? It's not the fault of the materials. The materials don't need to be updated and put into app form so children will like them. That's not the point. But anything I do with this is not a neurology development thing, okay? Nothing that I do with this is developing my neurology, okay? Like, you know, I'm not like developing a refined pincer grasp as I like try to, you know, no, this is what I do, right? I go blah, blah, blah. That's what I do, okay? And I'm not developing my brain. I'm not developing my brain. I'm not developing sophisticated fine motor control. Why do I need sophisticated fine motor control? Sophisticated fine motor control is helping me develop my cognitive capability. The brain exists to move. The brain exists for action. Okay? So, you know, this is a primitive action. This is primitive. This is not primitive, okay? This is not a primitive action. This is a developmental action. I build the richness and the sophistication of my brain I build the sophistication of my problem solver when I'm developing sophisticated control of myself and my understanding of the environment. Okay, so what is this good for? Well, this is good for many things. And an app on this thing can do a very nice job of helping me master, say, multiplication tables, okay? Now, is that what we're trying to do in Montessori environment? Well, probably not. I can, if I'm a medical student, yeah, I can make flashcards. That's a good use of my time, flashcards. Better is writing the flashcards, making the flashcards, doing the motor movement to transcribe, making the flashcards is also a strong developmental activity. Probably flashcards that I made and that I carry around in a little stack, probably that's a better developmental resource than the flashcard app on the phone because it uses my full body to engage with them, the hands. So one, look around your environment and if children are distracted by things in your environment, maybe you can reduce the number of things in the environment. We know that the more Montessori activities, the more Montessori materials, the better the developmental outcomes. So maybe you should clean house a little bit and get rid of the things that really aren't Montessori. Second thing, create peace and create beauty and use your tools of observation. Every child is interested in something, right? What do we have to do, Anna? We have to follow the child? We have to follow the child. What does that mean? We don't follow the child as they run down the hallway kicking the pink tower blocks. We follow the child's interest. So are you doing observation? Are you regularly doing observation with every child in your classroom? Does every child have a long observation session? Maybe, I don't know, what is it, once a month maybe? Something like that? Yeah, at least, okay. So if you're not doing observation and your classroom doesn't seem to be well focused, maybe you should study carefully the child and learn what Jonathan is interested in. How can we hook Jonathan's interest? What else do we want to say? Anna can answer this question in a different session too. She'd probably do a more complete job of it. Let's see. Practical life is something that gets neglected, and practical life is fundamental to the development of self-control. So if you have children who are not engaged, and if you have a classroom that's not in a mixed age environment, then it's going to be very difficult to achieve the goals that you have in Montessori. So, step one, get closer to Montessori. And maybe we're going to take one more comment here, and then we'll stop. We can take one more question from anybody? We're supposed to go until 11:20, right? It's only 11. Do we have a little bit of time? Yeah, I can take all the time we want. I mean, it's your call.
Essa depois?
Yeah? Yeah?
She thinks it's better to
Take a break.
for...
Yeah, I agree.
Take a break.
Yeah, I agree, yeah.
Bom, o professor Rios vai responder as outras perguntas. Amanhã, depois da fala dele, ele vai estar disponível para responder também algumas perguntas. A gente agora vai fazer um pequeno intervalo, né? Tem o coffee break. E daqui a pouco, daqui a 20 minutos, são 20 minutos, nós voltaremos. E aí a gente vai ouvir o jornalista e escritor André Trigueiro, que vai fazer sua participação aqui também. Obrigada. Thank you so much.